thanks for listening to this latest Jiffy and Stubbsy podcast, 6th in the series. 6, wow. Dual code rugby star Jonathan Davis is in South Wales. I'm in South London. Once again, we have a very special guest joining us. First up, Jiffy, are you still on the Watt bike? Are you still...
I'm still doing a little bit, not as much as I have, but helping out. The boys are doing 1,000 miles in May, so I'm just chipping in with 15 miles or so, but I was out cutting hedges this morning. They needed cutting, so that's what I've done today. Just normal day in lockdown.
Hang on, the World in Motion guys are doing a virtual cycle of the 92, and I'm told you're doing Swansea to Cardiff. Is that right?
Well, you've told me no. I thought it was about 20 miles, not 50. So I'll have to wait and see and check. Hang on, you doing?
I'm going from Anfield to Prenton Park. That is
how much is that? 7 miles.
It's a very testing 7, and the River Mersey's in the way as well, so it's going to be difficult.
It's a joke.
All the best to the World in Motion guys. They're on day 4. They're heading north into the Midlands today. It's a great effort, and if you take a look at their map on social media, they're ticking off the stadiums as they go, and it's raising a lot of money for some very, very worthwhile causes.
It is.
Special guest today, very special guest. One of the country's leading broadcasters, the sports presenter of the year on many occasions, awarded the MBE in the New Year's Honours List for her services to sport broadcasting and the promotion of women in sport. Welcome, Gabby Logan. Gabby, good to talk to you. First of all, first things first, is Jiffy a real nightmare off camera? Tell me, please, that he is a nightmare of prima donna and very, very difficult.
I wouldn't necessarily. Nightmare summed it up. You didn't need prima donna. He is exactly how you'd imagine off camera. He's unpredictable. He's cheeky. He's liable to turn up minutes before you need him. So you can't plan with him or prep with him. And but he's consistent in that, so at least you know what you're getting. You know what I mean? There's a consistency. And then to that.
Arrives very late and just sort of breezes in as if it's all very, very off the cuff and winging it, but knows his stuff inside
exactly out. And delivers every time.
We're lucky. We're experienced broadcasters, so you know what time you need to get there. I'm always there an hour before. I turn up when I need to be, and I've been shunned now into commentary, so I don't do as much with Gabby in studio. Only down a 2-way down the camera. But this is going to be rather different for me, because rather than Gabby asking me questions, I'm going to be asking her questions now, so it might be a good opportunity to get my own back.
Gabby, we always talk about routine. What is your routine right now?
Well, luckily for me, I think we've got 2 teenagers in year 10 living in this house. My kids are in that year that's before GCSEs, so they're working from 8:30 in the morning till 4 o'clock on virtual lessons. So that means there has to be structure Monday to Friday, which I'm quite grateful for, because that means that we have to be structured. And Kenny's trying to run and sort out his business from home, as well as, getting involved in stuff outside. So we're up normal school time actually, and kind of working through the day and doing our normal days, and then obviously doing them all from home, and then a lot of exercise, a lot of walking. We live in the countryside, so we've been enjoying the fresh air and enjoying the beautiful countryside. And I have done a 1,000-piece jigsaw, but that was kind of early on in lockdown, when I thought we were going to get all kinds of unusual. I started even getting my old piano books out and thought I'm going to learn the piano again. And then I realised that actually even just watching a box set or reading a book was going to be an achievement. So I've started reading more. And
how old are the kids now, Gab?
So they're going to be 15 in July. They're 14.
Yeah.
So so they've been. You know what? They have been amazing. Actually, I've been really, really pleasantly surprised at how good they've been at the school, but also they've just been really nice people to have around, because you never know with teenagers, do you, which way it's going to go. And they've just been great. And my son's been like bringing me cups of tea into my office in his break time and things like that. And they've just been really lovely. And he actually said the other night, he said, Mum, he said, I think I needed this little reset in my life, a little kind of step back from school and just have a bit of time to kind of, because obviously their lives are so busy, like all of us. They do loads of sport. All weekend they're off playing. He plays rugby and he rows and he's doing everything, and she rides. And I think sometimes life just gets a bit much, doesn't it? And it's just, you're on this treadmill and you just keep going. And
it
actually,
must be nice, though. It must be nice for them because to have you and Kenny, because the both of you are very busy, and you know you got a lot of weekend work. So and they out of house and home, are they? The three of them.
Yeah, well, well, that's the thing with Kenny and I. We always say, like, we haven't had a nanny since they were 5. But that means that we generally are never together. We actually worked out the other day that this period of lockdown was probably the longest we've spent together since we got married, because we're always, one of us is always off working, and then we come back and the other one takes over, and then, you know, it's a bit like that. During the week it's not so bad, but weekends are always busy. So actually for the kids to have both of us here has been really interesting, I think, because, you know, they've just spent a bit more. It's not usually holidays, isn't it, where you have that time together as a family. And so to have it in your own home with the routine that you have at home and just having conversations and discussions. I found myself the other night, was locking up for the night, and my daughter was getting some water. And Lois, we sat down at the kitchen table and she started asking us questions about when she was a baby and what it was like when she was born. And, you know, we had these weird, I ended up getting quite teary. And at the end of it, she went, "Thank you so much. That was so," and I said, "Don't thank me." You know, she was just like, so, it was so lovely, because they're the kind of conversations you normally you suddenly have the night before they get married or something. But it was really, it's been really nice having those more thoughtful times together and being, you know, able to connect in a different way, I think. And not
Gabby, Jiffy, do you think this has forced all of us to do a little bit of a reboot and a reset and just think of things that maybe do pass us by sometimes? And Gabby, I'm very mindful as well that yesterday was the anniversary of the Bradford fire disaster. I think you made a documentary to mark this tragic event, haven't you?
Well, actually, the documentary we made 5 years ago, and it's the last time it was on BT Sport last night, and it's the last time that it will go out now, because the license for a lot of the clips has now finished. So BT Sport said they wanted to put it out one more time. And I mean, I can't even believe it's 5 years since we made it. We made it for the 30th anniversary, let alone 35 years since it actually happened, you know. And funny enough, I've been writing about it as well, because I've been trying to write a lot while I was in lockdown, while I've been in lockdown. And I was writing about it the other day. And then Isabel Williams, who made it, said, "Would you do an interview with Paul Hayward for the Telegraph to talk about it? Because we want to promote the film." And it's amazing how easily you can slip back into that day, you know, and the memories of that day are so incredibly vivid, and, you know, everything from the smells to the sounds to the, you know, to the whole mechanics of the day and what happened and where we were and everything, because we were sitting very, very close to where the fire started, and I was on my own with my siblings, because my parents, or my mum's tickets, well, normally we'd sit with her, but they'd give them away to family because it was the last game of the season. And so there was so many things that day, you know, because of whatever reason, we made decisions that meant that we all survived. And we, you know, we could easily have made other decisions. And I think that was the one thing that, as I've got older, I've become more and more kind of reflective about, I think, you know, and realise just how easy when you hear big disasters on the, you know, news, and you think how you make decisions in those moments and how that can be the difference between life and death.
Gabby, when you think of the way the years do pass by very, very quickly, don't they? They absolutely fly by. And as you said then, it does everything that happens. What's happening at the moment, I think, is forcing us all to reconnect with each other, as you said then, in a different way. A few days ago, as you said that you got slightly emotional about your children asking you questions, all of a sudden the other day, the phone went, and it was my daughter, and she said, "Go to your front window." And she'd cycled from where she lives just to cycle past the house and wave, and just to sort of shout to each other outside the window and stuff like that. I do think little things like that are having a big impact on people, and I think you could probably mirror that. Everyone will have a little moment like that, I would imagine. And I'm very aware as well that a lot of people will not be having moments like that because it's just impractical.
Yeah, well, I mean, people's families, and we live, both of our families, Kenny and my families, are away from where we live. You know, that his family are in Scotland and my family are mainly in South Wales and Yorkshire. And so we don't have anybody family-wise locally. And it's really, we do a lot of Zooms. My sister lives in America. We're doing a lot of that. And, you know, you realise how just that simple act of, you know, just being able to go and give my kids to give their granny a hug, you know, and for example, in a few weeks' time, you mentioned my MBE was due to be my ceremony Buckingham Palace, and that's not going to happen now. And my mother-in-law I managed to get a ticket for my mother-in-law and my mum to come with the family. And my mother-in-law's ticket got returned from BA the other day. Just the email popped up and said, your flight won't be happening, blah, blah, blah. And I felt quite, it was quite a sad moment because it was going to be such a lovely day. And, and she's 89 and hopefully she's fit and well. She'll be able to come down whenever it is. But you realise that those moments in life, and you've got to really treasure them, haven't you? And you've got to, not just kind of skip past things and think onto the next thing all the time. I think it hopefully will, as you say, Ray, make people take stock, reboot, and reflect what's really important to them.
I think sometimes you take everything for granted. I think that's the key. I know it's like, my mum's 81 next month, and but I can't go see my kids because they're up in Cardiff, so it's not supposed to travel. But with my mum, because she's on her own, she's sometimes vulnerable, and I speak to her on Zoom, and then straight away, right, she's a bit down today, so I'll drive down and I'll just make sure I sit outside. But the youngsters, they're a lot keener on social isolation, I think. And my kids don't know, don't come up there to see us, we miss you and all this. Whereas, if you go down to see my mum's trying to climb out the window to give me a cuddle, and you're thinking, no, man, that's not why I'm coming down to see you. Just chill out now and stay away. So it's very, very difficult, but it's
do you think that's because older people, I think, probably, they've lived longer lives, they know they're closer to the end of their lives. The young people are obviously feeling like it's, they've got more to come, haven't they? And so I think they're surprisingly sanguine about it, actually, and surprisingly of.
And a lot of them, like Jay, my wife runs a couple of care homes, and you can see, because kind of, unless they make an effort to do things, sometimes they just switch off. They think, right, we've lived our lives and we can't see our family, we can't see our friends. And they just think, unless you kind of enthuse them and keep them occupied, they're going to go, what's the point? Which is really, really sad. So, fingers crossed we can see this through and then crack on with some.
It's interesting. My son said to me last night, because I had, for the first time really yesterday, I had a kind of real low moment, and I just was a bit quiet. And because I'm not like that normally, he was going, what's wrong, Mum? What's wrong? I said, no, I'm just a bit quiet. And he started getting really kind of agitated that there was something wrong with me. And I said, I've just had a moment really where it just felt a bit much today. And he said, Mum, just think, we're living through something that, we'll look back and people will go, did you live in 2020? He goes, it'll be one of those years that people remember. Yeah. And I said, yeah, but not really for the right reasons.
No, I know. You're same as us, Gabby, like all sports on stop. And you do, more than most, and all different sports. And then also, you do the corporate stuff and hospitality, and all that has stopped. So, I know. It must be. Have you got any kind of work that is still going on at the moment, or are you just doing it emailing and Zooming, or?
Well, I'm trying to write, because I've been meaning to do that for a long time. And the weird thing is, it's weird how the kind of things work. The week before lockdown, I'd had a meeting at my agents with their publishing arm, and I said, yep, I am going to do it. I'm going to get on, and this summer I am going to write. And then I just thought, right, when lockdown happened on that, that night, that Boris speech, the next day I just started, because I thought, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do this, So I've been trying to do like 4 or 5 hours of writing a day, which gets quite, your brain gets quite kind of fuzzled, and at the end of it you've got to take yourself off for a walk for half an hour because you're just at a screen. And then I've also got involved, I love, as you know, health and fitness and, released areas. And I'm starting, funny enough, a podcast, but it's more to do with the midlife, the midpoint of life, and the decisions and everything that you make, and, how you kind of like go on to the next half of your life, if you like. Because, last year there seemed to be a lot more about the menopause to do with women, but I think men as well in the midlife point can sometimes have, you're smiling, Jiffy, there, as if it's, I'm not going to say there's a menopause, but I think there's lots of things change, don't they? Your relationships with your kids, the relationships with your partners, the way you work, what you do, and actually, it's almost like a reset in many ways, that midpoint. And I heard something the other day which made me feel quite depressed. I turned 47 the other day, and one of my friends said, "Oh, I read an article in The Guardian, and 47 is the age where you're most miserable." And I was like, "Oh, right, great." She said, because the reason is because if you haven't achieved what you want to achieve by the time you're 47, then you think that you'll never achieve it. Whereas if you actually have got somewhere that you want to be, you'll spend the rest of your life feeling quite satisfied. And it's this point of like no return almost, which I'm not sure I agree with. And I think, but I can see that there is that point in people's lives where they go, well, that's it now. You know, I'm going to have to settle for this now. And
I think
I'm perhaps.
Age is a number, Gav. Let me tell you, age is just
I
a number.
agree with you. I agree with you. And that's what I kind of want the podcast to be about, is to have inspiring people, you know, old people like you, Jiffy, who've done great things.
See what I mean? See what I mean? Right, so I'm moving on, right? No, it's an autobiography, Gav.
Say that again?
Is it an autobiography you're doing, or just?
Yeah, I'm kind of more memoir-y, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, so it's kind of, and I've written about nearly 45,000 words, and I haven't even graduated yet. I haven't even started my career.
And I was looking back, you know, like on like Reason. Is your sister in Cirque du Soleil?
She was for many years, so she lives in Las Vegas. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Look at that.
She was when she was 18, she was modeling she was a model, and she was in Tokyo when my brother died, and she came home, and her then boyfriend was going to the Olympics for the last time that summer. He was a gymnast, and after that they went on this holiday to America, and he auditioned for Cirque du Soleil, and he was older than her. And so he went off to Montreal to train for the first permanent show in Vegas, and she went back to modelling. And she went to visit him in Montreal for a weekend, and they said to her, well, you were a gymnast, weren't you? She was a rhythmic gymnast. And she said, yeah. They went, oh, would you like to do an audition? I think they really wanted to keep them together because they're quite clever company like that in the old days. You know, they were quite a family-oriented company. So the next thing, she rings up my parents and says, I'm joining the circus. And my mum and dad were a bit like, she's kind of gone from racing around the world being a model to joining the circus. But the circus was Cirque du Soleil. And obviously the first show in Vegas was Mystère at the Treasure Island. That was the show she joined when she first started. And then she joined another show later on. But not for a few years now. She had a baby, and she tried for a few years afterwards, but she got a shoulder injury and stuff. But she still lives in Vegas. And that is, I mean, I've been Zooming her recently. You imagine Vegas in lockdown. I mean, she went down the strip the other night because she realized in the 20 years she's been there, she's never had a picture taken with the Las Vegas sign. So she decided to drive down the strip, and it's dead. Like the lights are off, literally. She took some pictures and sent them to us. And it's very, very bizarre, very bizarre. And that whole place, we're talking about our jobs being related to entertainment and being related to sport. Yeah. Vegas doesn't happen, you know. So her and her husband, well, he's her partner, he's a German musician called Elvis. He's not an Elvis impersonator. He's a classically trained guitarist, and he's in things like Blue Man Group and things like that, and he can't work, obviously. So so my mum said, oh my God, I've got all these kids with no jobs. So I was like, thanks, Mum.
There's a great program there, isn't there? Vegas in lockdown. Las Vegas in lockdown. That would be a great program.
Well, yeah, if you could only get in. Well, we were saying as well, Ray, like you live in London, in southwest London. One of my best mates lives in Marylebone with 3 teenagers. And at the beginning of lockdown, she's an actress. And she said, if only I had like a proper cameraman's camera. She goes, the footage that you could get for like zombie movies in the future, you know, all these empty streets in the middle of London in the middle of the day, you know. And her husband is, he did a big challenge for us for Sparks, actually. He ran the marathon over 3 days for Sparks. And he finished the marathon on the Mall, and they got a toilet roll and held it out for him, and he ran through the finish of the marathon. And there's nobody there. And, you know, he's been doing his training runs through Soho and Covent Garden, and they sent me a picture of Covent Garden. You know what Covent Garden's like. Yeah, can you imagine Covent Garden? Not even a pigeon. Because where do the pigeons go? Nobody's eating. Literally deserted. And yet I don't think anybody's got any proper stock footage of all of this, you know, because you're not really allowed to go out, are you, and take footage if you're a cameraman. No. But it's Vegas in lockdown and London in lockdown. Two things you never thought you'd see in our lifetime, really.
What do the pair of you, what do you both think about rugby's return? I'm just keen to hear your thoughts on rugby returning. I'm reading today that the clubs are saying we'd like to have a say in how we restructure the calendar. You go first, Jiffy. What do you think about rugby returning on the calendar?
I think it's an opportunity to kind of, have a fresh start, because they're trying to get this global game together. I think it's always going to be difficult with, television rights and the importance financially of the Six Nations. And that, I think that's been reinforced this time, because if they don't play rugby in the autumn, I think they'll have real serious issues. If there's no international rugby in the autumn, they will have serious issues. And whether that's going to be, I think it's going to be difficult with travelling with the Southern Hemispheres, which they want. But they can I think they can restructure it maybe for the following season, but do whatever they can as soon as they can to get the income in. So New Zealand are playing all interprovincial games. no travel there. Maybe Wales will play England. You know, the Pro 14, where we know what I are, is South Africa, Italy, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. Well, that's just a massive, you know, logistical nightmare. So they might play, you know, inside, and then maybe, yeah, it's an opportunity. But at the moment, I think it's just down to the first mode is survival mode, and that's where the Rugby League, you know, they've had a grant of 16 million off the government just because of the importance it is to the community. So that's a lifeline for them. So it's just a question of survival at the moment, and maybe restructuring for the following season and making it a global game. But you know, it's a lot of obstacles to get over first.
I think a lot of sports will have to have a look, won't they, at how they pay their players. And, you know, already we're hearing, you know, even the Premier League in football having wage cuts. And in rugby, that will happen, won't it, at the top level? And maybe rugby can't sustain the levels of full-time professionals that it has at the moment. You know, if you want to make it a proper financial model that works. And as kind of crude and away from why I love sport, which is the soul of sport as it is, you can't survive unless you get those metrics right. And so, you know, and that all trickles down to grassroots anyway, doesn't it? And us valuing grassroots sport. So I hope that, you know, they don't lose the revenue from the autumn test, because they'd already, you know, been calling out kind of how, you know, they were in a bad way before then, weren't they? So they were, you know, worried about their finances before then. But I hope it does allow the sport to have a look at its financial model. I mean, obviously, it's been in sharp focus anyway because of the Saracen situation this year, hasn't it? So, and while they have obviously transgressed in the greatest possible way, you know, there are other clubs who are having issues and how they pay their players. So that part of it is really important. But getting back and playing the sport, you know, actually getting back, it's going to be obviously quite tough for rugby because it is a contact sport. But no, I mean, football is a contact. You know, you don't have 90 minutes of football without coming into contact with people. So the idea that, you know, that rugby will, and the RFU yesterday, I think, put up something about underage playing touch only next season, which my son was horrified about. You know, he was like, we can't just play touch for a season. And you can't intrinsically change the sport and what it is and the development of the sport. But coming back and without a crowd, you know, would that work for rugby? Well, it wouldn't work in the Six Nations or in the autumn test, would it?
It's very difficult, you know, to play. You play sport because of you want to get up to the bigger stage, and it's all about playing in front of a massive crowd, which creates an atmosphere. Right? And that's to me, that's why we started playing sport, is because of that. And I think also, you know, in rugby, you're going to have the international game is the cash cow. So they'll have to take priority before the other clubs. Then they'll siphon the money down. But I do feel that, as Gabby said, maybe, you know, as we've all done, the transition into post-sporting career, you know, is serious, and you've got a lot of mental issues now with players. So it might go back to reassessing the situation and say, right, they've got to do something. So it might have to go to part-time for a little bit. I think that's the key part, is going back to part-time. So, but even, you know, touch rugby with kids, you're still going to get within 2 meters because you've got to touch them. So it's
exactly
where you start fresh and wait for everything to finish, rather than kind of maybe try and change what the kids have been trying to do.
Look, I understand all manner of plans have to be put into place. It would be negligent for these plans not to be put into place. But I think in a way I'm more interested about how the country as a whole is going to recover from this crisis. Just picking up a point that you made there, Gabby, that of course, and as you said, Jiffy, it starts at the top and works its way down. But the impact on local communities that sport has in regard to rugby union, rugby league, football, just everybody being able to get together at whatever level to try and interact through sport. I've always viewed sport as something like, it's a social service. And what the clubs do, rugby, football or whatever, what they do for the local community is absolutely vital. And I'm not sure yet that we're anywhere near with social distancing and with resources or whatever. We're nowhere near that being put back into place. And that is something that I feel as though could be a problem and needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I would totally agree with you.
I think, and I think that's where the Rugby League, I have to say, stepped up to the plate this time because they realised that it's how important the game was for the communities, and I think that's the proposal they gave to the government. You know, it was the health and the mental state of all those communities, and how important that particular game was, and at the centre of the community, you know, was Rugby League for a lot of them. So
absolutely,
it's going to be the same.
That's select committee, actually. I happened to listen into that select committee where they were speaking to MPs and talking about their finances. And you know, and I spoke to a colleague about it afterwards. As the taxpayer, £16 million going to that to that sport, I have no problem with. You know, and I would never begrudge, you know, any sport obviously that does good in the community, but it's not. But rugby union is in a different position and has a much higher earning potential than rugby league, and that is why, you know, it's a much smaller sport and it does have great impact in the communities that are often disenfranchised, and you know, in areas that are nowhere near have the economic potential, if you like, of some of the communities that rugby union serves. So. Yeah, I thought that was, as you say, I thought it was a very shrewd move, and to get in there early as well, and to try and safeguard your sport.
But the same that Gabby said, Ray. Gabby's mentioned about the money and the salary cuts. I think it's going to be, you know, income and expenditure. I think they've spent what they can't afford, and this might have to, like, the project reset in all walks of life now. But this could be an opportunity to do that and have a little bit of sensibility about players' wages, especially when you can't afford it.
Yeah, there'll have to be a reset, and in League One and League Two, there might be an opportunity here. In football terms, for League One and League Two, there might be an opportunity for even more community involvement with the club, as long as it makes massive sense, and sometimes seems so easy to say, but so difficult to achieve. But now, surely, is the time for local communities to have.
And you know what, Ray,
clubs.
Those clubs that have always in the past, you know, been a community club, you know, and have really kept those strong links with it, they're the ones who will survive through this as well. Yeah. And I think they're the good work that they've done, and so many have, obviously, you know, have done that in the past. But, you know, those who have chased, you know, the big bucks and maybe come a cropper at times and have forgotten about their fans, I think will find that it's going to be harder for them to pick themselves up and to find a place in this new sporting landscape.
Yeah, there'll be stronger regulations to try and make those problems, to erase those problems. Gabby, your Six Nations presentation positions, sometimes it doesn't half look cold. It looks so cold sometimes. And
no, this is my opportunity. Wow. You should hear her moan, let me tell you. She is, honest God, Gabby doesn't suffer fools in that studio, let me tell you.
This season in France, in Paris, for the France-Italy game, I mean, it wasn't just me. Joe Worsley, you know, I mean, he's a big guy, you know, and he was shivering. Thomas Castagnet, I thought at one point rigor mortis had set in, because the three of them had like massive blankets over them, but I couldn't put the blanket over me because I was going to be on air potentially any minute. So I was absolutely, there was this wind coming through and it was just biting. You know, when you can't stop your teeth can't stop chattering. And I think we were literally the most exposed position in the whole stadium. And on the Monday, the producer, Rich Hughes, one of our producers, he emailed me and he said, "You mentioned how cold you were 14 times throughout that programme." And I said, is that all?
What they try and do, right, is they try and bring the experience of a live game to the viewers, and then they stick us right in wind tunnels. Another bad place is Murrayfield, right? Yeah. And also the tannoy is right behind us. So, we were lucky. I could move about, but Gabby, you're lucky, Gabby. 4 hours. You look good in a hat, right? I don't, so that's why I'm so.
I'm not allowed to wear a hat. He won't let me.
Yeah, well, you should. You should. Paul Connell's got no hair, right? He's freezing. He's absolutely freezing.
He pulls a little hat out and takes it off.
Obviously, thought he was turning up in in Dubai because he had a jacket. No thought. I was thinking, what is he thinking? So it's great for me to see all these big, rough, tough blokes freezing their nuts off, right? But it's like
because also I think quite often these guys who don't work with us regularly, if they go to a Six Nations match nowadays, not as a player, they're probably in hospitality.
Yeah.
So there's a few glasses of something have gone down before the match to warm them up, you know. Then they nip in at half time, do a little speech, have another couple of glasses. They're not sitting in that, you know, freezing wind tunnel for the whole time. But you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way, because I love the fact that we're outside. I did the Women's World Cup last year in France, and we were similarly in, it was gorgeous weather, however, we were in those positions where you're in the stand practically. And when you've done that kind of broadcasting, you don't want to go back to a sealed box, because you feel so much a part of the, you know, the whole experience. And I think you can really bring that back to the viewer at home. So for all the weather challenges, and, you know, and there have been some, I think it does add to the whole coverage.
You know, you cover a lot of sports, Gabby. I don't want to, and do you find it? I think I enjoy working, right? I enjoy doing the league and the union, because when you turn up, everyone gets on with each other. We have dinner maybe, you know, night before the game if we've got to travel, and I just love those evenings just as much as working in the day. So when you go to different sports camps, you cover every sport, I think. Is it the same kind of environment in all different sports?
Yeah, I mean, in different ways. Like you do something like match of the day. You're together all day in the studio in Salford, you know. So you have breakfast, lunch, and dinner together in one day. When you go on to like a World Cup in football, it's slightly different. I've been doing like the job you did, Ray, the England, where you're in the England camp and then you're moving around with them, and you have a little team together, and there might be like 5 of you, and you become for 5 weeks. You know, you are each other's wives, husbands, best mates. You know, it's like you just. You know everything about everybody's lives, and you're very, very close. And in the Women's World Cup last year, we didn't just travel together. I mean, we went in minibuses around France. We were like we were on tour, so we were together the whole time. You know, we didn't have any moments of. I mean, we'd literally just kind of sleep separately. That was it. So yeah, you have to get on with people, don't you? In those, you have to enjoy the people you're working with. I think it'd be very hard to spend that much time if you didn't enjoy it. You know, but the Six Nations, I think, is a very special bunch as well, because we don't do a lot of rugby union, sadly, and so I think we all value it when we do get together for those incredible occasions, and we do enjoy those weekends, and that's, you know, hopefully that comes through to the viewer, that we're having a nice time together and we're enjoying each other's company.
Absolutely does. Gabby, what are your thoughts on Newcastle United's takeover? It's just seems to be going on and on and on, but then I guess that's the way it always has been.
Yeah, it did look like this was going to be the one, didn't it? Just before lockdown, ironically, wasn't it, when it was all mooted? I do think there's a growing, as it's gone on, there seems to be, at first I was looking at surveys online, and the Newcastle United fans weren't seemingly that bothered about the potential new owners' reputations and their human rights records at home and everything else, the political side of it. As this has gone on, there does seem to be a growing interest and perhaps a little bit more awareness that, you know, you're jumping out of Mike Ashley, but you're jumping potentially into something that can also have its own controversies with it. So it's not a straightforward kind of, you know, the Messiah's arrived. You know, I don't think there's any, you know, but then again, you tell a football fan that Mbappe is going to be coming next year, and you know, and then and that you've got, then they'll suddenly go, okay, hang on a minute, I'll just suspend my worries about that. Let's see if it happens. And you know, I'm not hugely optimistic that it's going to reach fruition, if I'm honest.
And what how did you end up being? Because I know you got, you know, strong links with Leeds. How did you end up? Why not Leeds as, you know, maybe Newcastle?
So when I was well, you'll know this, Ray. When you move around as a footballer, obviously, you know, your kids kind of move around with you as to where, you know. So when my dad left Leeds, I was 4. Then he went to Coventry, and I spent a few years going to Highfield Road and watching a bit of Coventry City before they moved out to the Rico. And then we went to Spurs, and then he went to Vancouver Whitecaps, and then he came back and he went to Bradford. Then he went to Swansea, then he went to Bradford, so he was moving around and my allegiances were moving around. You know, on a Saturday, looking at the football results, you know, my eyes were darting all over the place. There's so many divisions and so many. And then he went off to manage Wales just before I went to university. And so at that point then, I didn't really have a Saturday, you know, there wasn't a club I was with on a Saturday. And so I went to watch Newcastle United in my first term at Durham. And my mum had a small sports management agency, and she had a player who'd signed for Newcastle. And she said, if you take his wife to the matches, I'll pay you 10 quid. So I used to pick his wife up in my Fiat Panda, drive her to the matches. And then the player, who was from Cyprus, didn't realise that his contract had tax to come off as well, so he left. So he went back to Cyprus, and I just kept on going to the matches. And then I started going out with a Geordie at university, so he was a Newcastle United fan. And then I worked for the local radio station, and you know what local radio is like. You know, if you work for a station that is in a city like Newcastle, all the sport isn't sport, it's Newcastle United. You know, it's like the news and the Newcastle United. So I just became, you know, that kind of one big club, city, town kind of atmosphere, and I just got sucked into it. And it was the Keegan era, and it was, you know, it was just amazing. And the players that we had at that time was so special for so many, you know, from the Peter Beardsleys, David Ginolas, Tino Asprias, Les Ferdinands, you know, these huge characters who just took over the town. And so, I've definitely I've thought in the last few years that it would have been handier to have had somebody a bit more local. But you know, you stick with them, don't you? And obviously, at the moment, we're still in the Premier League.
But Newcastle as a city is just massively infectious, and every time you go on the train, you see the stadium as you arrive in, and then of course in the Great North Run they have something that really that deserves a Nobel Peace Prize or something like that for the good that is done. Gabby, presenting Sports Personality of the Year, surely that must be the most scariest thing ever on God's earth, because I watch you all do it, and I think to myself, my word, that must be so daunting. Whoa, scary.
It is. The first one I ever did was ironically in Leeds. When they started moving around, it was 2013, and that was so nice to be in my hometown. You know, from the first one I did. However, what Ali McIntyre, the editor, didn't tell me until I turned up on the day before for rehearsal. The day before that, we had to walk down this really steep set of stairs onto the stage for the first one. And do you remember Marion Bartley fell down the stairs a little bit when she was coming down? And I knew somebody would. I was just so glad it wasn't me. You know, at least she was a Wimbledon champion, so she was fine. But that entrance, well, however you get onto that stage, once you said your hello, you kind of, then you're in this, you know what it's like. It's like being in a sporting match or an encounter. You know, the nerves just go, and then you're in it and you're loving it and you don't want it to end. And you look at it, you watch the, we've only got 20 minutes left. The boat's closed, you know, and it's just another one's gone for the year. And now I still get nervous, but I just really love it. So it's great working with Gary and Claire, because I don't see them all year, you know, because they're off doing their sports. And Gary did say, as we were going on about 2 years ago, Gary just whispered, "Greatest laxative known to man, Sports Personality of the Year." So at least I knew Gary was a bit nervous as well. And Claire, you can tell that Claire, for all her incredible confidence and brilliance on screen, you know, she definitely gets quite nervous backstage. So it's a lovely thing to do, and it's such a special, I think if you love sport, you know, it has its knockers, but if you love sport, I think it is just one of those great nights of celebration.
Do you still get nervous doing, whether it's the corporate, whether it's the live events, or obviously Sports Personality? Do you still get nervous before you go on air?
A little nice kind of tingle of butterflies, you know, just a little bit. But I when I first started out, I worked for Sky, and Sky employed this guy called Ed Percival, and he was a performance coach, and so he used to work with us on handling those kinds of things. And he only came in to do a few classes with us all, but him and we kept in touch. And then when I went to ITV, we'd speak every few months. Sadly, Ed died 2 years ago, and every time I had a big event like the Olympics or something like that, we'd have a coffee, and he was just very subtle and really good at kind of he'd say things like, do you find that perhaps your left hand's doing, you know, or he'd say, oh, maybe when you ask that question, don't do this. And, you know, he was really good at that kind of performance thing. And with nerves, he had some brilliant strategies as well. And so I really miss him, actually.
And you'd listen, Gabby, would you? I can't believe that.
Do you know what? I missed him so much that, you know, Rich Hughes, last year at the World Cup, or 2 years ago at the Men's World Cup in 2018, I said to Rich Hughes, right, I want you to email me after each time I've done a show and just let me know the things that you liked. Well, I got like a 6-page essay after the first one. So because I think it's, you know, it's really important if you, whatever stage you're at in your life, to just have a little kind of, and you don't want to do it every time you're on screen, but every now and again to just have a check. You would if you were a sportsman, wouldn't you? And you'd accept that advice from somebody. So, but you've got to respect the people that are telling you, haven't you? You've got to make sure.
I had that. Yeah, I was lucky. I had remember Peter Corrigan, who wrote for the Observer.
Yes. Yeah.
I'd ring him up after every television show, and he'd give me both barrels if I repeated myself. Or he said once, "So you say to be honest too often. Are you lying to us?" I said, "No, Peter, I'm not lying." "Well, stop saying to be honest." "Thank you, Peter." And you remember those things, and it's great because he's got no, he just wants you see you do well, and he'll bask in the glory of that as well. So, but I don't get nervous from presenting because not presenting when I do the rugby, because I think we've been involved in the game long enough, but because you cover so many sports, right? Which sport? What's your favourite sport, right? First of all, not working on, but what's your favourite sport?
Oh, that's really. I couldn't. It'd be like asking which is your favourite child, because you couldn't imagine living with if you only had one sport that you could watch, and then you're not allowed to watch the other ones. I can't, like, my son's been watching the Last Dance documentary on Netflix. Yeah. So he's got us into that, watching it. And he's also got a basketball hoop. And he's just really, in lockdown, that's what he's been doing. He's just been shooting hoops all day long because he can do it on his own, which obviously he can't play rugby on his own. And so I've really enjoyed that. And it's made me want to watch more basketball, and that is not my favourite sport. I'm not going to say it's my favourite sport. But I think when you watch anything at a high level, and you know something about the characters behind it, it's so intoxicating, isn't it? And you want to see more of it. You want to understand a bit more about it. And I love, in the summer, I love doing the athletics because it's so simple athletics. It's so straightforward, and yet it's never ever straightforward. There's always so many complicating factors and things happen, and it's never without drama. And I love doing the rugby because it's just the occasion of the Six Nations is phenomenal. It's like no other tournament in the world, I don't think, really, truly and honestly. And then obviously with football, it's everybody's narrative, isn't it? Everybody has an opinion, everybody wants to talk about it, and it's so unifying, and it's so important, football, to the culture of our country, I think. And that's why women's football for me has been so important, because football has a strong leadership potential, with social issues, and with whether it's racism, sexism, misogyny and homophobia, and so football is very powerful in that respect, and the messages it sends out. All sport is, but football is the most commonly played, and certainly the biggest sport in terms of revenue. So I'm just really, and it sounds like I'm kind of dodging your answer, but I'm just so happy to be involved in those sports. I wouldn't want to give any one of them up.
Well, Gabby, you make a really good point there, and it means now I can jump on my soapbox, because everything you say about sport and its importance, I'm sure we'd all echo what we said about before about how important it is. Yet government, I know they've got other things to worry about at the moment. I know they've got lots of other things to worry about at the moment. But the role of Minister of Sport seems to have been absolutely negated, and it seems to be pushed to one side. But what we're saying here is sport is massively important for helping this country recover.
And always is, Ray, as well, and so you're right. The role of the Minister of Sport seems to have gone down to like Parks and Recreation, doesn't it? It doesn't seem to have that political weight. We've got the Premier League is one of the biggest businesses in the country, and has revenues globally, billions. And so financially is super, super important to this country, let alone socially important. Grassroots sport as well, from whether it's all the major sports, the power that they have to change lives, not just with regard to health, obesity and getting kids moving, all the interactions that you get, and learning how to work in a team, all those things that you get from sport. The potential then obviously to keep adults into their later life healthy as well. Yeah. So there's it's so multifaceted. And then we mentioned earlier about rugby league and communities, and having that community spirit, and understanding, kind of that sport is about more than just winning and losing and, coming away with trophies. That's the nice stuff at the very top. It's all the reasons we wanted our kids to play sport when they're little, is to learn those values and to understand about each other and understand about their bodies and their health. So, if I was Minister for Sport, I think, I would be throwing those issues right at the forefront of every government policy.
Yeah.
You know, sport should be involved in health. It should be involved in education. It should be involved in, you know, transport and travel. It should be involved in every area of government. And yet you're right, it seems to have been pushed down the list of importance.
I think it's double standards, and I think it's replicated, having come through with kids in school. Even sport in school is pushed to the end of the queue, because and I'm thinking, no, you're on about obesity, you know, mental health issues. Sport. Well, if I hadn't, you know, got into sport at a young age, you know, I don't know what I ended up, you know, losing my dad, and you know, the community, the discipline, and the friends that you make from sport. And I think it's just, I'm right. If you are the Minister of Sport, or the health education in you know, in all schools in all countries, this is an opportunity to say, right, this is how important it is. You know, and then they should just jump on the bandwagon and force it down the government's necks.
Well said, Jiffy. Time is against us. Jiffy, don't yawn. Gabby, I always say, do you keep any memorabilia? Do you collect things from all the stuff you've worked on down the years? Is there anything in particular?
The only thing I've got is I try to, you know, the lanyards you get from like World Cups, Olympics. Not so much a Six Nations match, because you get like 5 during a whole Six Nations, but but from big events, I try and keep my lanyards, which is, and they're all in a box, and which I think, you know, when I'm kind of old and grey, well, I am old and grey, but when I'm much older and much greyer, I, you know, to be able to, they tell a story, don't they? Each one, you know, where you were and what you were doing and who you worked with. So that's one thing. I mean, when I first started out, you know, back in the day when you had newspapers, and everybody was kind of like, you know, you'd have cuttings and things, you know, I've got all my dad's cuttings from when he was a player, but I used to keep articles, but now I don't do that so much. So the lanyards really, I'd say, Ray, is my main, you know, thing that is my memory of events that I've been to.
Great.
You must have kept your Commonwealth Games leotard.
Oh yeah, I've got a box of all my Welsh. I've got my Welsh kit, which I pulled out at the last Commonwealth Games to see what if it on. It's hilarious. It didn't even fit me then. All right, the shoulders of the jackets are out here somewhere. The fabrics, like, it's so nylon-y that if I rubbed it hard enough, I'd probably burst into flames. It's like the kit is so dated. You think, why is that? It doesn't look, you know, it's not that long ago. And then you look back at the videos and you look back at what we looked like in the early 90s, and you think, yeah, actually that probably worked all right then. So
you've got to see Kenny in those Commonwealth Games leotards and a fancy dress. That's
he can barely fit into his own old rugby shirts. He put one on the other day. He found his last shirt from the World Cup in 2003, and he popped it on, and I said, "Oh, sweetheart, you look like a fan now."
What are you watching television, Gabby? I know you're very busy. We always say,
loving a bit of we've watched we loved Normal People, the BBC iPlayer.
Right, I'm going to ask you now. Watch that with your kids.
Well, what happened was I was watching it with Kenny, and then Lois said she'd started watching it on her iPlayer, and she came in and she put a hoodie over her face. She didn't want to watch it with us. She was too embarrassed to watch it with us, which was hilarious. Yeah, but it was, I'll tell you later on something that Ruben said as well, but I don't know if I can say it on the podcast. But because Kenny was trying to use it as a way of teaching, I was like, no, this is not the right tool, Kenny, no. But the other thing we really liked was Unorthodox. Did you see that? About the Orthodox Jewish girl who left her community in New York, and that was really good. Yeah, very good, very interesting. And what else? The kids have like, what's it called? Schitt's Creek. Schitt's Creek, have you seen that?
No.
No.
I got 3 new ones today.
It's a little comedy. The kids have enjoyed that. So, yeah, but I think we've kind of exhausted Netflix now. So we actually found ourselves playing a board game on Sunday night after the Prime Minister's speech. So, yeah, we've got to those stages of lockdown.
What board game was it?
Oh, it's a bit cheaty. It's the kids love it. Would I Lie to You? The board game to Would I Lie to You? Because the kids just love the show, and I absolutely smashed them. And they went, "Well, you've been on the show, that's why." I was like, I don't know what's on the cards. They're just not very.
You're a good liar. You're a good liar. Oh, you're a good liar.
They're not.
Time has beaten us. Gabby, thank you very much indeed. We appreciate it. Great to talk to you.
And you too, Ray. And you, Jiffy. Good to see you looking so well.
Stay safe, everybody. Jiffy, take care. Gabby, take care. And thanks for listening to Jiffy and Stubbsy. Hope you'll join us again. Please hit the subscribe button.